Why? Just why? I don't understand.
It is now game 2 of the preseason. First game for the Golden Knights in the Fortress for the 2022-23 season, and boy is it a good one, being between the Golden Knights and the visiting Los Angeles Kings. Both teams played split squad games last night and are coming in with the other half of their team for this tilt between the two of them. There are a lot more recognizable names in the lineup for the Golden Knights. Names like Kessel, Eichel, Smith, Marchessault, Carlson, Brisson, Mannanen, Cotter, Lecision, Ronbjerg, Petrangelo, Theodore, just to name a few. And the goalie battle, the goalies for the Golden Knights being the two people competing for the starting job this year in the persons of Logan Thompson and Adin Hill, with Thompson getting the first half of the game and Hill getting the latter half of the game. Other players in this game for the Golden Knights who are less regulars for us as fans, but still as important, are players like Quinney, Mannanen, and Rumpal, Brisson, Cheka, and Ahak on the back end. A lot of high-end talent in this game for the Golden Knights, so one would expect that the game would look pretty solid, especially coming off of the way the other squad played last night. Let's set the expectation as not taking 9 penalties, and if we're able to score a couple of goals going into this game, that would be an ideal outcome. Let's get some data on these players, see what the line of Kessel, Eichel, and Smith can do, and take away what we can take away from it. And so as we go to drop the puck, I can't help but notice during the warm-ups that both Thompson and Hill have some very, very nice looking goalie gear. Now, I'm a former goalie myself, and I've always been mesmerized by pad setups and helmets, and both of them have absolutely hit the nail on the head with this one. But I digress. Let's drop the puck on game 2 of the preseason. Now, there isn't really a lot going on in the first period, especially the early phases of the first period, because the Golden Knights can't do anything right, it would appear. They're not really controlling the puck very well. They don't even land a shot in the first 5 minutes of the game, being outshot by the Kings 4-0. Logan Thompson really didn't have to do a lot to hold down the fort on those 4 shots because a lot of them were from the outside, and so there wasn't really a lot of high danger chances in the game up until the 5-minute mark or so, until Jack Eichel collects a pass from Phil Kessel streaking down the left wing, blows past the defender, and absolutely roofs it on Kings goalie Cal Peterson to kick off the scoring with the Golden Knights up 1-0. Now, the one thing that stood out to me on this goal is, oh my goodness, Jack Eichel is really, really fast. Now, I know we've kind of, as fans, not really been able to see Eichel at his full potential, given that he's been recovering from injury and then he was trying to get reintegrated. But we all forget he was the second fastest skater at the All-Star game a few years back, losing by only a couple tenths of a second to then fastest skater Connor McDavid. So clearly this kid can fly, and he proved it on this play. One of the things that one of the players I have to really take my hat off on this play, although he won't get any point credit, given that the assists were given to Kessel and Smith respectively, I've got to give the honorary tertiary assist to defenseman Dino Cheka. He made a very, very strong play behind the net that allowed him to get the puck up to Smith, to Kessel, to Eichel for the goal. So while it won't show up on the stat sheet except for as a plus, good on you. That's a really, really strong play behind the net, and without it, the break would have never happened. So with that, the Golden Knights jump out to the quick 1-0 lead, and it'd be a good lead to sit on. That is until Kessel gets nabbed for tripping at 9:45 into the first period. It was an offensive zone penalty, really, really far away from our net, so there's no reason to take it. Kind of a dumb one, but it's his first game in a while, and his first game in a Knights uniform, so I'll give him a little bit of a break. And lucky for him, the break was well received because the Kings didn't really do much on the ensuing power play. A player that I really have to tip my hat to on this penalty kill is Caden Korzak. He had a couple of really strong blocks, one of which happening with about 15 seconds to go in the penalty kill on a strong point shot, which kicked the puck out of the zone, and the Kings wound up never getting the puck back in, thus basically nullifying the rest of the power play. And then the game kind of settled into a rhythm. There was a lot of neutral zone chances, a lot of outside shots from both teams, but the Golden Knights really didn't pick up the pressure. It was a lot of trading blow for blow, Kings and Knights going back and forth. There was a minor scary moment with about 5 minutes to go in the period where Logan Thompson ranged out to play the puck and got a little bit lost. And as they say, a wandering goalie is a lost goalie. Fortunately, there wasn't any harm done. Knights were able to clear the zone pretty easy. But it just is. It was one of those moments that made my heart beat a little bit too fast for the second game of the preseason. Later on in the period, as it continued to play out, there was a good pass from Eichel to Kessel on a quick low to mid snapper that was just tipped out of the way by a defender. That was about 16-20 of the first period. The one thing I liked is that the Eichel, Kessel, Smith line has shown a lot of chemistry, especially early in the first period in both the offensive and defensive zones. Sure, they got that first goal on a quick tic-tac-toe breakout pass, which is basically prototypical Golden Knights offense, which is awesome to see. They were very responsible in the defensive zone, making sure that the opposing teams, if they were even able to land a shot at all, the shots were coming from the outside. Another good thing that happened right at the tail end of the first period is that Marchessault basically outmuscled two Kings defensemen and drew a penalty, almost fed the puck across the net for Brisson, which would have been a tap-in, and he had a decent chance, but the play was whistle dead as the puck wound up going out of play. So that leads to the Golden Knights' first power play of the game when Fiala got caught for holding at 17:07 of the first period. There was a good low to mid kind of pass from Eichel to Pietrangelo, which gave us a very decent shot. It was basically just a slapper, which wound up hitting Peterson roughly near the chest. And then we tried to return the favor when the second power play line came out with Theo passing it to Brisson and absolutely rifling it from the top of the circle. I have a feeling we're going to see that shot a lot, especially if Brisson makes the NHL roster this year. It's just a cannon. Ultimately, the Golden Knights wound up not scoring on that power play, but it was successful. It didn't produce anything on the scoreboard, but it was successful. And with that, the first period grinds to an end. There was only about a minute left at the end of that power play anyway, and the Golden Knights just casually slowed things down. Throughout the first period, the balance really shifted. The Kings dominated the early play, and then at the Golden Knights landed the last 7 shots of the period. They were out shooting the Kings 11-8 at the end of the period. It was 60-40 at the dot, and the Golden Knights defensemen and forwards had a combined total of 5 shot blocks, the majority of those coming on the penalty kill, which is a testament to the new Bruce Cassidy defense, which is apparently very solid and really good on the penalty kill. It's kind of a shame we don't have a power play goal yet, but with only one opportunity and a couple of very strong opportunities to score on that power play, it'll come eventually, but just not in this first period. And now the second period gets to start, and this is where the game took a turn for what would come to be worst for the Golden Knights. Turns out LA Kings goalie Cal Peterson sustained some kind of lower/mid-body injury in the first period that nobody noticed. So they wound up switching goalies about 10 minutes earlier than was initially anticipated for the Kings, switching from then traditional starter Cal Peterson to a goalie who I have never heard of before by the name of Phoenix Copley. And I really wish I didn't know that name as well as I do now, as anybody who watched the game will have gathered. And the Golden Knights actually got off to a really, really hot start at the start of this first period. A really good low to mid one-timer from Kessel to Smith a minute in really set the tone early that the Golden Knights were going to be hammering home shots in the second period. That line has a lot of chemistry, and they just keep seeming to find each other in the open ice, which is a good thing to see as a fan, especially because there was some apprehension as to how Kessel would fit in with the Golden Knights and the established players that are there, like Smith, and what the new broken up misfit line would do. And so far through, at this point, about 22 minutes of game time, it seems to be turning out pretty well. So the Golden Knights were kind of dominating the early period until one of the Kings players weighed a bit of a too heavy hit on Alex Pietrangelo early in this preseason. And Daniil Chayka took offense to that. Good on him. He's a rookie trying to crack the roster. He's probably number 7 on the depth chart without Nick Hague being factored in. So anything that you can do to draw the attention of coaches is great. It's the early preseason. Nobody's going to get mad at you. Except you really don't want to get into a a semi-fight and somehow be the only one to come away with the penalty. Now, I've watched it back like 4 or 5 times, and I still don't see how it was a penalty on Cheka. The Kings player basically yeeted his gloves off and was ready to fight, and Cheka just was standing there. And for some reason, they grab him. So I don't know what's that about. Maybe it's just a residual from the previous game when we took 9 penalties, so maybe the refs were half expecting it. I don't know. But that being said, it was still a roughing minor at 3:45 of the second period. And fortunately for Cheka, just like in the first period of Kessel, the Kings weren't really able to do anything on the ensuing power play. The majority of all the shots the Kings landed on that power play were from the outside, basically closer to the boards than they were to the dots, which is light work for an NHL caliber goalie, Logan Thompson, and a really strong defensive pair, whether it be McNabb out there with, whether it be McNabb or Pietrangelo or Theodore or Korzak. There wasn't a lot going on, so there's not really much to say. The fun thing that I liked is that right as the penalty ended, Sakari Manninen came flying down the middle of the ice and just missed the short side on a quick break. That was at this point in the game where I really started to notice how good of a player he is, because I'd never seen him before. And believe me, you're going to wind up hearing that name a lot over the course of the next few minutes, because Manninen really came into his own in the second period. That being said, following Manninen's quick break and just missing, the combined efforts of Eichel and Kessel kept the puck in the offensive zone for like a solid 45 seconds. It was ridiculous. It was a clinic in puck possession. There was barely any passing. They basically just skated laps around the Kings forwards and some defensemen. It was laughable how unfair the defensive pairing was. Which was really good. They wound up not really getting any shots on that zone entry, but it was just really cool. This was about 7 minutes in the second period, so the Golden Knights are clearly flexing their muscles a bit. Now we get to the 10-minute mark, and as is per usual in the preseason, there's a goaltender switch, at least for the Knights, because the Kings already did theirs, in which we brought out Logan Thompson and put in new acquisition Aiden Hill, and he's ginormous. I know I've called him Aiden Mountain before, and I might have a couple of slips up and keep calling him that because he is huge and he takes up a lot of the net. So he comes into the game and the confidence is feeling pretty good. And just as soon as he comes in, the Golden Knights get a fast break up the ice, and the only way to stop it is for the Kings to take a penalty, as Kevin Fiala takes a slashing penalty at 11:47. It was convenient given that it wasn't really a very harsh call. It was very soft, and it really tilted the game because up until that point, the game had gone really stale following the Eichel-Kessel escapade in the offensive zone 4 minutes prior. So it was good to turn the game around, and goodness, the Golden Knights took massive advantage to try and build some momentum, try and extend the lead out from 1-0 to 2-0. Theo is incredibly fast. The Knights lose the opening faceoff, and Theodore basically takes the puck from the defensive zone, skates past 3 players, and while he doesn't record a shot, he basically is a one-man zone entry. And he set up a pass that wound up leading to the first-ish chance of the power play. The only thing I have to worry about, though, is that right after Theodore's opportunity on net, the Golden Knights break down defensively, and there winds up being a shorthanded breakaway partial, which Hill fortunately makes a save on, given it was really his first taste of action when coming into the game, which is good. So the Golden Knights regain the puck on the power play. They gain the zone entry quite easily, might I add. And somehow the puck finds its way to Pietrangelo in the middle of the slot. Great chance, but better save. This wound up being the only recorded shot of the power play, but it was still a really strong effort. But it didn't, by any stretch of the imagination, mark the end of the pressure offensively the Golden Knights put on, because shortly after Pietrangelo had a prime scoring opportunity, Eichel hit the not scary side of the post, but he still hit the post from a good angle, which means that that puck was 2 inches from going in, but 2 inches in the wrong direction. So it was a very solid opportunity. And right as the power play ended, Smith had a really good one-timer in the low slot, another great save by Copley, and one would figure that that would basically signal that the Golden Knights were going to take over the second period. Because with only 7 minutes left to go in the period, one would figure that we could lock it in, keep the momentum going, and build off of it, try and get that second goal that we couldn't get on the power play. Now that would be good conventional wisdom, but that is not what happened. Because very shortly after the penalty ended, forwards Kessel and Lecision ran into each other. This created a bit of an odd man rush, and ultimately Kevin Fiala was able to capitalize on Hill kind of losing his edge on a cross crease feed and pot it home, tying the game 1-1. Wound up being Fiala from Clark and Anderson Dolan at 14:07. That one kind of took the wind out of the sails of the Golden Knights, or at least I thought it was going to, until it very obviously didn't, because very quickly after the Kings made it 1-1, Quinney and Chayka did their best to try and give the Golden Knights the lead again on a quick break-in. Really, really good opportunity with Chayka feeding it down to Manninen, who gave a quick bump pass to Quinney, who fired it on net. And with Chayka crashing, he just missed. He caught the very top of Copley's goalie pad and wound up just squeaking off into the corner. It was one of the better opportunities, given that these were players who we've barely ever seen at the NHL level. And, just proof that Manninen is in the right spot and he's got good chemistry with the players on the ice. It helps that he's been playing professionally for longer than I've been watching hockey, it would appear. So there was that. But it's hockey. It swings both ways, and the pendulum quickly swung the other direction as Fiala got another partial breakaway on a 2-on-1, and it was another really good save by Hill. This was at the 17-minute mark, so there was about 3 minutes to go in the period. And right at the very end of the period, Manninen to Theo was another really solid opportunity, just missing. It was a very good zone entry play with Manninen breaking in and then kicking the puck across the ice to Theodore, who came flying in at top speed again. Another good save by Copley, and that really marked the end of the second period. The thing that I can take away from the second period is that following Fiala's tying goal, the Golden Knights really took over the play and decided to basically run the show. Even though they didn't score at all in the second period, they made their presence known. The offense was flowing, and it was really, really just a fun period to watch. They outshot LA 8-4 in the period, thus extending their lead to 19-12 total. Their face-off percentage was still about 60-40. So clearly we figured out something at the dot this preseason, whether it be the matchups or whatever. The Golden Knights are winning more face-offs than they're losing, which is leading to more offensive opportunities and better defensive structures when you can win your defensive zone draws. And now with the third period starting, one would figure that somebody's going to have to take control of this game, and goodness knows the Kings really tried to take control of this game early in the period. Not even 2 minutes in, the Kings get some sustained offensive zone pressure, and Madden puts it off the scary side of the post, so the inside of the post, but it just kicks out towards the center of the ice, and the Knights are able to clear it away behind Hill. Made my heart skip a beat. Entirely too stressed out for the second game of the preseason, but hey, I'm a fan, sue me. Well, it was just, it was scary. But what was really interesting is that immediately after the Kings player hit the post, it turned into an offensive chance the other way for the Knights as Theo came flying in on a fast break, and it wound up being a good save the other side on the break-in by the Kings goalie. And this would become a theme. The Kings goalie, Copley, was just all over the place in this third period. So a few more minutes of monotonous skating back and forth ensue without a lot of shots on net, just a lot of neutral zone play, a lot of chip it in, change, turnover in the neutral zone, chip, change. Just preseason hockey. That was until Smith and Theodore go in on a fast break, not necessarily odd man rush, but it was a quick break on a turnover in the neutral zone, and Theodore winds up drawing an interference penalty by Adrian Kempe at 5:09. This penalty was definitely a penalty. The standard of officiating was debatable at best, but this one definitely was an interference. He got in the way. There wasn't really a lot going on the power play, but they spent a lot of time in the offensive zone. They just couldn't quite get the quality shot. That was until on a shot pass from Theo from the top of the zone was a high tip from Mannanen that just slipped by on the short side and wide. It was a really, really good shot pass and an even better tip, and it's really a shame that it didn't go in because it was tracking in the right direction, and they looked really solid on the offensive zone for the entirety of that power play. So the power play wound up ending it. They didn't score, but again, it was a very successful power play in every other aspect that you'd be looking for as a coach. There was another strong offensive zone stint started by Eichel just being really, really fast and out hustling the defensive pair of the Kings, which resulted in like 90 seconds of zone time in the offensive zone for the Knights. This was at about the 8-minute mark of the period. And you could tell that the Kings were a little bit gassed following the zone incursion because it wasn't but 2 minutes later that Kempe got caught holding Theo again. So clearly Theodore was on a mission to draw some penalties. And so we trot out the same power play unit that we've been trotting out for the entire game at this point. And the first unit doesn't really do a lot. Eichel, Kessel, and Smith were able to hold the zone, but they weren't really able to record any quality shots. So they switch them out on the next draw. And Mannanen winds up taking a shot he's got space, he's got a screen, and he just slips it by far side again. And not 15 seconds later, there was a pass from the top of the zone down to Brisson on his spot, and he just rifled it again. Really good save by the goalie. Both of these opportunities were the two best opportunities the Knights had on the entire power play. And they were from players that we don't expect to be or we have never seen in gold before. So the fact that we have these two players that are sitting here creating good opportunities, yes, I know it's only the second preseason game, but they're there and they're still providing a lot of really good opportunities. So we can take what we can get, especially this early in the preseason. Another power play where we didn't score, but I'd be remiss if I didn't call it a successful effort. And you can tell that the team was able to build on the momentum of those two successful but scoreless power plays because players up and down the lineup started making really, really good moves. The one that comes to mind was at about 12 minutes into the period, so about 8 minutes to go, Cotter makes a absolute power move from behind the net after Lecision wins the battle and won a battle behind the net and slid the puck out to him. And he takes the puck from his backhand to his forehand, reaches across to the middle of the ice, and Copley has to just make an absolute 10-bell save on him. Absolutely robbed him. Cotter was in tight, and I'm pretty sure if the goalie wasn't absolutely locked in for the entire night, that puts the Golden Knights up 2-1. That was an incredible play, given that Cotter is essentially playing a back-to-back, given that he was in the game last night against the Colorado Avalanche in Colorado. So clearly, Knights management want to see more of the Cotter, Ronbier, Lecision trio because we didn't get enough of them last season on the injury list. So they were playing well. And the cool thing about it is even the top guys got in on it. Smith and Eichel both had near-miss tips on point shots in quick succession with about 5 minutes to go in the game. And the thing that makes that chance so important is that the entire thing was initiated by Kessel forcing a turnover in the neutral zone. Clearly, Kessel might be sharing a hot dog with Mark Stone because, holy moly, it looked like a carbon copy. You'd be amazed what you can pick up in 3 days of training camp, and clearly Kessel picked up Stone's amazing puck handling skills and turnover abilities because that was a Mark Stone-esque turnover, so please do more of that when the regular season turns around. It wound up creating the Knights tilting the ice in their direction. The momentum was good. They just still couldn't really land any shots. Players were skating around haphazardly for 3 or 4 more minutes, a lot of chip and chase, neutral zone hockey, until Kessel was able to have a great chance on a point shot from Theo, which rebounded right to him, and he just wound up missing it with about 2 minutes to go. That wound up being the Knights' last real scoring opportunity in regulation. That was what I thought was going to mark the end of the festivities of the game. We get inside of a minute. Both teams kind of let up. That was until Pietrangelo and Theodore decided to give me a minor heart attack by turning over the puck behind the net with about 30 seconds to go. It was a little stressful, but the shot that they wound up getting wound up hitting Hill right in the crest. So all's well that ends well, I suppose. Please don't do that when the regular season starts, but it's the preseason, you get a pass, and it didn't cost anybody anything. So we can live with that. And thus, the horn sounds on the end of regulation, and we're heading for overtime. My thoughts on the third period: Mannanen, Kessel, Eichel, and Cotter were all very standout players in that third period, all of them recording great opportunities that could have put the Knights up 2-1 if any of them had been 2% more on the net. So we can't really fault them. They played incredibly well. We led the shots in that period 15-5 and 34-17 overall, 52% at the dot for the game, and 12 total block shots. Again, the majority of these coming on high danger chances that wound up not being high danger at all, and a couple of them on the penalty kill, carrying over from the first period. But alas, we are headed to overtime. And oh boy, was overtime fun, wasn't it? The overtime started off good with the Knights winning the opening faceoff, getting some good offensive zone time. They open up with Eichel out there and Theodore and I think it was Smith, and they're skating around, they're setting up. They wound up never getting a shot, and about 45 seconds in, a Kings player springs out on a breakaway, and Eichel starts at the top of the circle and absolutely chases down the Kings player and breaks up the breakaway before he's even able to get a shot. I thought this Kings player was in red line all alone, and Eichel comes flying out of left field after a 50-second shift and just takes the puck right off his stick. I mean, sure, the player wound up crashing into the goalie and knocked Hill's helmet off, but they never recorded a shot on goal. So again, I can't reiterate this enough. Eichel's really fast, and we got a full taste of how fast he can be in the course of this game, especially when he saved that breakaway in overtime. This was really the high mark for the Golden Knights, as not too long after this incredible defensive play by Eichel, the player who I would consider to be one of our best defensemen, and Alex Pietrangelo, takes what I consider to be a somewhat dumb penalty, especially in overtime. He takes a hook at 1:10 of overtime. And so the penalty kill trots out, and it's 4-on-3. Anything can happen, and anything almost did happen, as Korzak and Karlsson were able to break up a passing play at the top of the zone and get sprung in on a quick 2-on-1. But the cross pass from Karlsson to Korzak wound up just not being remotely close, and so they wound up not getting a shot. And it wasn't too much longer that the Kings were able to get back in the zone, and unfortunately, lightning struck as Kempe won the game on the power play on a cross-crease feed at 1:48 of overtime. So that was a little bit of a bummer. There was a lot of positive things to take away from this overtime period, except for the penalty. The only really thing you can take away is that we won the face-off to kick off overtime and held the puck in the zone for 45 seconds, but didn't really manage a shot. And then Eichel was really, really fast. So a little bit of a bummer for the Knights overall, not being able to walk away with a win. An overtime loss in the Fortress is still a good time, but it's not the same as getting that OT winner. That being said, the festivities weren't over yet, as apparently unbeknownst to the Golden Knights coaching staff, they were going to do a for fun shootout. And one of my favorite lines from the entire broadcast, as Dave and Shane do an incredible job as always. I love their broadcasts. Them noting that the coaches clearly didn't know what was going on, and then cutting to a feed of the tunnel cam as we see the coaches come running back to the bench, made me chuckle a little bit. It brought a smile to my face after being a little bit bummed out that we lost. But the practice shootout, I didn't expect to be that intense, but if you watched it cover to cover, it was a time. Because Aiden Hill started off kind of shaky, giving up 2, but while I didn't really pay attention to what the Kings shooters were doing, I definitely pay attention to what our Knights shooters were doing. And so we're going to break down what happened in the shootout. Brisson was the first shooter, and he wasn't able to do anything or score. He made a good forehand-backhand move, but he just ran out of room. The second shooter was Cotter, and he almost pulled a year one William Karlsson. He didn't go between the legs, but he faked going between the legs and wound up going forehand-backhand on a good move and beat the goalie. Third shooter was Mannanen, and you can tell this guy's been around. He knows how to score on the shootouts. He just came in somewhat moderately paced, hash marks, and just snapped it off the right post and in. So just a rip of a shot. Rempal, who didn't really do very much, was the fourth shooter. He didn't do much in regulation, but he didn't do a lot wrong, so I can't really be mad at him. And he made a slick forehand backhand deke and beat the Kings goalie like he was a rental car. It was ridiculous. Wasn't even in the same zip code. Marchessault was the fifth shooter, came up and missed wide right. Carlson was the sixth shooter. He basically skated right up the middle and hit the goalie in the chest. Quinney was the seventh shooter. He came down and missed high to the right on the backhand. He was closer to hitting the protective netting than he was the net. But, he fired it on the net in the backhand. It's more than I could do. Eighth shooter was Theodore, and I thought he was going to do his move that he always does. If you've been a Knights fan for long enough, you know exactly what move I'm talking about, as he goes to it every time. He didn't do it. He didn't score. So I think the next time he's in that position, he will go for his move and make everybody in the fan base collectively happy. Eichel came down the left-hand side of the ice as the next shooter, wound up trying to go far side, but wound up hitting the goalie right in the glove. McNabb does shoot, but he doesn't shoot next. Kessel's the next shooter, and he throws one of the more interesting straightaway shots I've ever seen in a shootout. He basically off-speeded. He basically threw a changeup, and it had pinpoint accuracy right under the goalie's glove, but I was expecting it to get into the back of the net a lot faster than it did, so it made me chuckle a little bit. Old Cat's still got some talent, and he put it on display. Even though he couldn't score in regulation, he proved to Knights fans that he can still shoot it. He just doesn't have to shoot it hard. Then McNabb is the next shooter. I'm not entirely sure what he was trying to do, but it wasn't very good. He still almost snuck the puck in, but the Kings goalie kicked it out with the left toe. Ron Bjerg ran out of room as the next shooter. He tried to get too and tight on the dekes and wound up not getting anywhere. Then Smith, forehand, backhand, shelf past the goalie. It was a real beauty. He was on it all night, and it's nice to see him light the lamp, even though it was in a practice shootout. And all of this is going on because when we would score, Hill would give up a goal, and when we wouldn't score, Hill would make a great save. And at this point, if this was a regular season game, this would have been the Golden Knights' longest shootout already 3 rounds ago. And yet the game's not over. That was until Pietrangelo mercifully goes high glove side on a slap shot, no less, off the post and in, and Hill comes up with the save to win the marathon 15-round for fun shootout. So now we can finally break down my thoughts of the end of the game. Players I really liked tonight, Mannanen was all over the place. Having never seen him play before, and this being his first game in an NHL uniform, he is really, really good. And it's a shame that I don't really think we have room on the forward core. But if I was a Golden Knights player manager, I would be, especially if I was Kelly McCrimmon right now, I'd be trying to find a way to get in the lineup because he gelled really well with whoever he was playing with. He gave a lot of strong offensive zone opportunities, and he made a lot of smart decisions in the defensive zone, all of which are positive things to take away from a preseason game. The Cotter line, which was Cotter, Lecision, and Ronbjerg, again, they played last night, and they still found a way to have enough jump to play all the way through their second game in 2 nights. And they looked really solid, with Cotter getting robbed on a 10-bell save and Lecision and Ronbjerg making very strong offensive and defensive zone decisions. I think that line's going to stay together. They may be the number 1 line in Henderson come the start of the season, but that's not a bad beat, given that if there's any injuries to any Golden Knights regulars, they'll just slot in where they slot in last season. So we know what to expect with them, and I'm really happy to see them doing more of that over the course of this preseason. I've got to tip my hats to the Eichel line as well. A lot of really good chemistry. Kessel, Eichel, and Smith. I was a little apprehensive because I like the misfit line of Carlson, Marchessault, Smith. They've been our security blanket for 5 years. And so to see them broken up is kind of sad, but Smith, Eichel, and Kessel, really gel together, and they gelled really well over the course of this game. So if they can put the puck in the net, I'm not going to complain. If they can replace as many goals as we gave up last season and then some, heck, I won't complain about lineup composition at all. I just want to win games. And finally, I got to give props to the 2 goalies, Logan Thompson and Adin Hill. I know it was a combined loss again, but Thompson didn't give up any goals in his first half, and while Hill gave up 1 goal in regulation in the overtime loser, Both of them were on plays that were really good passing plays that I'm not sure any goalie had a reasonable chance. The first one was just unfortunate as he lost an edge, but he looked really solid stopping breakaways and making sure the game was kept under control. The one thing I noticed is that Thompson is a very good puck handler, and Hill is not as good as Thompson, but he's still a very passable puck handling goalie. So I can't really complain about the goaltending performance. With the biggest question mark being goaltending coming into the season, I don't really see how that's as big a thing, as both looked very solid tonight. I'm curious to see how they're going to play throughout the rest of the preseason, as well as every player who I've mentioned recently. But this small sample size of 1 game and 2 for Cotter, Lecision, and Ronbjerg are all positive signs for the direction of Golden Knights for the rest of the 5 exhibition games and the subsequent 82-game regular season. So Golden Knights take the ice next on Wednesday at home against the Colorado Avalanche. Second meeting in 3 games, and I've got a feeling there's going to be a couple more NHL regulars on the lineup for the Colorado Avalanche, and hopefully we get a couple more regulars as well, as the first round of roster transactions is slated to happen, I believe, on Tuesday. All that being equal, it was a great game. It's just unfortunate the Knights weren't able to come away with the win. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys again on the next one.